Good morning, good afternoon to everybody who joined in today for this webinar. We thought we bring up a topic that is not so much on the radar screen in microfinance in that sense that we will present it today. Of course, everybody talks about social impact and microfinance, but let's have a look at social issues in rural finance that perhaps appear a little different when we take the lens that we are proposing to take today. So at first, in these 15 minutes that we have, I would want to go into a bit of detail into three types of typical social issues that I mentioned here: self-employment related issues, community issues, and land issues. After that, we will have a look at why is this actually relevant for rural finance to look at these issues and why should an MFI consider that. And then we close with some ideas on entry points for MFIs, how they can address these social issues, one being social and environmental management systems, and a second one, intentional product design. So let us go right into the topic. I thought there are so many actual social issues out there, but let's try to classify them somehow. And these categories might not be perfect, but we are trying to just put them into boxes so that they fit on a slide, basically. Let's have a look at which is probably the biggest box here, the first social issue related to employment or self-employment issues in rural areas. It's not news that in rural areas there is high levels of and also underemployment, so this doesn't come as a surprise. And this is an issue that actually microfinance does try to address, mainly by giving out productive loans so that people can get self-employed. However, even if then people become self-employed or if they grow a bit to employ people, probably starting off with household labor and then hiring labor, there's often this issue of income, which really is a serious social issue, because in rural areas we have the working poor. People are working from morning to evening, but they do not earn enough to actually make a living. So income is a serious social issue in rural areas, often linked to low productivity. However, this is not all. Perhaps linked to also the low productivity leading to the income issue is the next bullet point in working conditions. What can, if the entrepreneur does have employees, what can they really pay them? Can they pay something around minimum wages, not to speak of a living wage? So it reinforces the income issue that we talked about. But we also need to look at working hours, or we need to look at, are there contracts that safeguard both sides, actually, the employer, the self-employed person, and the employees. Working conditions then also cover issues of, especially in agriculture, protective clothing, application of chemicals, and things like that. So it's quite an important social issue out there that partially borders on environmental issues that is very, very seldomly looked upon in microfinance. Now we come to some items that are more often mentioned. Yes, in rural areas, high levels of informality. But why is this such a big social issue, actually? Well, often when businesses are not registered, these businesses do not have access to government programs. And with that, it can also be that they do not have access to social security schemes, if it's an entrepreneur for themselves, but also for their employees. So with this informality come a number of additional social issues that actually should be addressed. One further issue under this employment box is unfortunately still child labor. Perhaps we should have put it almost as the top one. Today there are still, according to ILO statistics, 168 million child laborers worldwide. When looking at agriculture, this sector still has most of them. 59% of all the child laborers are found in agriculture. So it is an issue, especially also in microfinance. We did some research a couple of years back that did confirm that very differently according to the regions of the world, clients of microfinance institutions do engage child labor, own children, but also children that they kind of draw from the labor market, if there really is one for child labor. Similar thing for forced labor. I don't go into details here, and perhaps the last one that I want to mention is the lack of association in rural areas. Especially for smallholder farmers, this can have a negative impact if they are lacking the negotiation power, for example, for better input prices. So this self-employment box actually is quite a heavy one on the social issue side in rural areas. When we move on to the next one, community issues, I listed a few less. I don't want to go into too much detail here. Under health, safety, and security, what issues do we have there? Use of chemicals that may spread. We may have fencing of properties that restrict access of community members to, for example, also cultural heritage sites and so forth. Or this can lead to disputes that need moderation, and the chief becomes very important here, but we never know what the chief eventually then does. Which leads to the next box, the land issues. I think everybody knows ownership issues, land related, is tricky, especially if then it can be or cannot be collateral linked. What do we do, for example, with the sharecropping arrangements? Can that be used as collateral? Yes, no. What can be used as collateral? Who reaps the benefits in a sharecropping arrangement? We have gender issues in there. If ownership is with the male household head, who takes the decisions then? And we can also do have resettlement issues. It might sound like, what does this have to do with microfinance? But, and this is also what we have seen, the chief, typically in traditional setups, would allocate land to individual farmers. But the chief may also allocate land to corporates that normally lead the discussions with the chief. And there can be some economic resettlement in there when community members that are under the chief get different land allocations. So I spoke a lot to that one big slide just to give an idea of what are these typical social issues that we are looking at. The next question is, so why is this relevant for rural finance? Why should an MFI consider these issues? Well, when financing rural populations, that actually invites these social issues entering the financing decisions. Because to all these issues, there are risks related. Some negative risks, sometimes positive risks. Impacts that then actually materialize out of these risks, but also opportunities. And those should be looked at, analyzed, assessed, and included in financial decisions. So in that sense, considering social issues is as much as a business case, because there are opportunities, as a type of a moral responsibility. And I think that moral responsibility echoes quite easily, I think, with the microfinance community. I just listed some things here of when considering these issues. Yes, it can enhance social performance. Often MFI can achieve a social mission, also to treat clients clients responsibly, understand their needs. It can also improve the MFI business because demand for services, for example, for work improvements, can go up, and it can lead to a higher client retention. It does reduce credit risk when looking at formalization, how MFI can help formalize the businesses of clients, because then structures may not just be pulled down. And also, if safety at work is increased, typically productivity increases, which then reduces credit risk. And on two further ones, looking at child labor definitely can address avoiding negative publicity that may come up with it, and also social investors can be attracted. So that was more or less the introduction of what these issues are, what implications they can have more on the positive side for microfinance institutions. And then I wanted to go into the part of the presentation presenting two entry points. The first one may be one that is not that old of a discussion for the microfinance industry. However, I think it is becoming increasingly important that microfinance institutions should think of developing social, and typically one adds environmental management systems. So what is this actually? This slide is very full. I'm sorry for that. But I thought it makes sense putting a bit more words here, because such a social and environmental management system is a management system, yes, that allows a financial institution to identify and assess such social and environmental risks and impacts. Such a system can help avoid, minimize, or mitigate where such risks and impacts have been identified, for example, for workers, for affected communities, for the environment. And these systems help ensure that the affected communities are appropriately engaged. So it's really this idea of this management system, what it should do. Typically, these systems contain a number of elements. First of all, a policy that covers social and environmental issues. Often these policies contain standards. Then there is normally a social and management procedures, tools, responsibilities have to be clearly outlined. Training is part of these systems, and reporting. To show that this is not something far in the future, I thought I bring up some examples actually from Kenya, where we have seen last year that the banking industry adopted sustainable finance guiding principles and made them industry-wide standards to promote inclusive growth. Every financial institution that is a bank, and microfinance institutions in Kenya are banks, will have to adhere to that. The principles don't sound revolutionary. But when we look at, for example, Principle 2, growth through inclusivity and innovation, the third one, managing, mitigating associated risks, the fourth one, resource scarcity, choice, and the fifth one, business ethics and values, this covers quite a number of these social issues that we actually talked about earlier on, and that need to be covered by management systems of banks, including microfinance banks in Kenya. So what do we see? We see that, for example, Jamii Bora, earlier on this year, actually approved a social and environmental management framework. It's a microfinance bank. Last year, we conducted, also in Kenya, a study with a SME bank on the agricultural portfolio and we only looked at loans below $50,000 Only we looked at those. So that's why you see average loan amount was about 20,000, repayment period 2.5 years. And what we wanted to know was what social issues actually feature in these SMEs. And we did see a couple of issues featuring, including a tendency, a small tendency, but there was some child labor, occupational safety, and health issues were there, not so much formalization, but we also saw that many of these SMEs already implemented some S&E measures related to wages, to workplace safety, and so forth. So that was actually quite interesting to see that these clients are doing it. Plus, that we saw that the awareness of addressing social issues was there. And most frequently, the clients cited that reduced operating costs and profitability is a benefit that they draw from looking at social issues. That was what I wanted to say about that first entry point, social and environmental management systems. The second entry point, and I am looking at the time, and I should stop talking now, but I still would like to walk you through a few examples here for this intentional product design. We did some research a couple of years back where we worked with 16 microfinance institutions worldwide to have a look at what social issues they discover among their clients and what can they do in their product design to address these issues. So here are some examples from that research project. If you want to know more, I put the website, the link at the bottom of this slide. So for example, some institutions wanted to address formalization. There they introduced awareness campaigns and client sensitization to the benefits and then linking them to business development services. For occupational safety and health, again, a client training on good working conditions. And interestingly, they came up with the idea of getting the loan officers agree with the clients on improvement plans. For the implementation, the clients had access to specific loan products for these work improvements so that they could actually implement them. Perhaps I only pick up the last one again on child labor, because that was quite interesting. Very different intentional product designs there. Microinsurance product related to health was introduced, an awareness campaign, or also a client training on how to increase productivity without reverting back to child labor. So that's an idea of what products can be designed intentionally. I wanted to show you also a few results so that you see, looking at social issues, addressing them in rural areas can work to the benefit of the client and also to the institution, because most of these examples that I am showing here also are a business case for the institution. For example, for employment income, we had one innovation on entrepreneurship training there, and we did see that the attitude towards entrepreneurship improved by 13%. So that was quite nice. We saw business profits increase by approximately $50, which was double the baseline profit. So when putting it into perspective, it is actually quite a big increase. Assets increased, and so forth. So you can go through those slides also in detail afterwards. So here we did see a positive impact on employment and income. The next example is on the formalization. It's an example where a sensitization campaign was introduced with a training on enterprise management and incentives to formalize. And we did see increased registration, increased improvements in separating business accounts from personal accounts, and interestingly also increased in awareness of the importance of social protection. So putting all of these indicators then together, we did see roughly a 70% increase by formalization itself. On child labor, that is the example that I already started hinting at, where the institution extended microinsurance coverage to household members, and it was a health and accident insurance. And we all did not expect this tremendous effect. So this really is an intentional product, a micro-health insurance that led to a 7% decrease in child labor. It led to lower risk of children involved in hazardous occupations and reduced the numbers of hours that children worked per week. So this really had a super impact, and it was an insurance product that made sense for everybody involved. And the very last example that I wanted to show you is one on occupational safety and health, where training basically was introduced on participators' safety education, and we did see that work-related illnesses and injuries reduced by 11%. People started applying safer working habits, and perhaps the last one still, that actually the productivity increases also led to an increase in monthly net income by $37. This was in India, so the $37 actually meant quite something in increase.